give your attention to our worthy National Master for the presentation of her external address.
Thank you, worthy Master. Washington continues to be a new experience every day, both in and outside of the office, and much of the time that's not a good thing. On any given day and on any given issue, there are multiple competing forces at play. Liberal and conservative media report on the same topic from such differing perspectives that it's hard sometimes to believe they're talking about the same subject. Social media at times is more important than factual articles in influencing public opinion. Caucuses within political parties seem to be divided as much as competing parties once were. Every time a bipartisan solution begins to develop, there's a rush to discredit it, no matter how good or bad it is. There are no signs that the extreme partisanship in Congress will end anytime soon. This is the climate in which we live. As Grangers who have taken pride in a century and a half of discussing hard issues, talking through them from different perspectives, deciding an action and moving forward in a united, nonpartisan manner, it's hard to understand and even harder to accept. So while the battles in Washington rage on, we try to set good examples in hometowns across our nation. And from our headquarters in DC, we take on issues, not individuals, and push for work to get done. Our National Grange activities in Washington have been both massive in number and intense in action this year. National Grange policy covers an enormously wide range of issues. Burton monitors all our National Grange policy, and we get actively involved with as many issues as we possibly can. Some of these, like farm and food policy, rural broadband expansion, healthcare, and the opioid crisis, are top priority and require intense time and effort. Your National Grange was successful in driving action on many of these key issues during 2018. Unfortunately, the timing and politics were just not right this year to accomplish much on things like immigration, farm labor, research, infrastructure such as highways, bridges, locks, and dams, term limits, and several more long-standing concerns of Grangers. Lawmakers couldn't pass a budget 5 months late, but they did manage to pass an omnibus spending package in March that authorized government spending through the end of the September 2018 fiscal year. The final omnibus did contain several Grange issue priorities, including $600 million of new money for USDA broadband grants, $1 billion of new money for state and tribal grants to address the opioid epidemic, and it updated and overhauled the Margin Protection Program for Dairy, MPP. This additional money into MPP, along with restructured premium rates, are meant to benefit small to medium-sized producers. When the margin between the average milk price and feed costs falls below a dollar amount selected by the insured dairyman, MPP makes payments to the producer. The National Grange worked closely with the National Milk Producers Federation to get these updates included. These funding offsets will not now have to be accounted for in the 2018 Farm Bill baseline, thus removing a huge obstacle from Farm Bill negotiations. We expected a Farm Bill by now, but Congress has not been able to get it to the finish line. I do want to give credit to the chairman and ranking members of the Senate and House Agriculture Committees for continuing to hammer out compromise the Senate and House bills during October, when most politicians were home campaigning. There's some optimism that a farm bill can pass during the lame duck session that actually begins today. National Grange has been advocating for fair and equitable treatment for all commodities, for all regions of the country, and for all farm sizes. The Grange and the dairy industry got a big win in the US-Mexico-Canada Trade Pact when Canada agreed to eliminate its Class 7 pricing system and phase in increased access for US dairy products. This coming year, our big dairy issue will be standards of identity labeling for cow's milk versus plant protein substitutes labeled as milk. Milk is clearly defined as a product of lactating animals. How then does the commissioner handle almond milk, soy milk, pea milk, and more? Instead of "got milk," the slogan might become "what's milk?" How important is this fight to Grange members? The Ag Committee will be discussing this issue. Considering the dire situation of the dairy industry in the last couple of years, what action should we recommend at this session to ensure that we have a U.S. dairy industry in the future? Several personal friends of mine in Pennsylvania, in dairy farming for generations, sold their herds and went out of business this year because they could not continue losing money any longer. Comparing costs, the average worker's salary in 1998 was $28,861 and increased to $48,642 in 2018. The price of a postage stamp increased 56.3%. Houses are up 91.9%. Gasoline increased 126%. But the milk price to the farmer dropped 5.4% over the last 20 years. What policy can we adopt this week and advocate for in Washington that will help farmers at least cover their costs of production and stay in business? Another issue in the news right now is lab-grown meat, or whatever we're going to call it. The FDA wants to be the regulator of lab-grown protein when it becomes commercially available, and FDA Commissioner Gottlieb wants to look at standards of identity definitions for food items. The definition of meat in the statute appears to clearly give USDA jurisdiction over any and all meat products. Meat producer and processor organizations are advocating for USDA oversight. We need to take a stand on how we believe cell-cultured protein and seafood that is grown in laboratory conditions should be named, marketed, and otherwise regulated. These are all pressing issues, and the Grange needs defined policy to continue our legacy as a leader in American agricultural advocacy. Similarly, we do have policy encouraging FDA and USDA to establish a standard definition of natural. Should there be definitions and standards of identity for marketing foods and non-food items as natural? Or is that just government over-regulation and the buyer should take responsibility for determining the truth in advertising? Food waste is a rampant problem, especially in the US. Should the Grange dive into this issue and develop programs to address the different ways we waste food in today's world? I believe agriculture has a big stake in this issue, and we should be involved in recommending solutions. With so many hungry people in this country, it's unacceptable that 40% of the food we produce ends up in the trash. Here's where policy and programming intersect, and our actions through community outreach and education in our local Granges can speak speak for our values as Grangers in the years to come. Healthcare. The omnibus financial package also accomplished a goal we had been working on for years: permanent repeal of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, or IPAB. IPAB, contained in the Affordable Care Act, was to be a board of presidential appointees charged with recommending cuts to Medicare if spending growth reached an arbitrary level. The Health and Human Services Secretary would implement recommendations. Neither the recommendations nor the actions would be subject to administrative or judicial review. This is rationing health care, and we were very pleased that it was finally repealed. Although included in the budget deal was funding for community health centers and the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP. Also, the National Grange supported these initiatives. The opioid epidemic is very real to those of us in rural and small town communities. National Grange has partnered with the RX Abuse Leadership Initiative, or RALI, to begin building a network of state and local coalitions of community groups, community leaders, first responders, school officials, medical community, law enforcement, and others to focus on awareness, prevention, treatment, and cure at the local level. We've seen a growing consensus that winning the drug addiction epidemic begins with family, friends, and the local community. Several state Granges have been recruited to join with Rally, the first being Maryland, which really took off in the summer with press events and exhibits at several fairs. Thank you, Alan. Most recently, Illinois had a great kickoff with Lynette taking a leading role. Drug costs and patient access. Healthcare is always on the daily calendar at the National Grange. Drug prices, out-of-pocket costs, and a growing concern that pharmacy benefit managers may actually be responsible for raising the costs of drugs to patients dominated our summer health agenda. However, the importation of unregulated prescription drugs without verification of safety or effectiveness is not the answer. We also spend a great deal of time on future patient access to Medicare and Medicaid in the era of ever-increasing costs for medical attention. We urge congressional action to fix the looming Part D out-of-pocket cliff coming in 2020. The 340B program was created to help hospitals and safety net clinics get access to discounted prescription medicines for uninsured and vulnerable patients. In recent years, the 340B drug pricing program has seen explosive patient growth against a backdrop of weak oversight and lax program rules by the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, which allowed hospitals and middlemen to profit without the requirement to help low-income patients. The Grange applauded the Department of Health and Human Services for its recent commitment to fix 340B. For next year, what are Granger's biggest concerns about health care? 4 of the current issues are drug pricing, drug availability, affordable insurance coverage, rural hospital closings, consolidations, and elimination of critical departments. We have taken some action in most of these areas this year, but it's difficult to keep up with all the issues. What should be our priority? Should we concentrate our efforts on 1 or 2 of these, or continue to dabble in all areas? What are you and your local Grangers most concerned about? And what are you seeing? Our advocacy efforts are helped immensely when we can put a face to the problem and tell a story of a real person facing the issue. Immigration. The Senate had an open-ended immigration debate for 4 days in February, but no solutions developed. Agriculture producers are still desperate for a fix to the ag workforce crisis. Ag lobbyists, including the Grange, were hoping for an immigration package to pass the Senate so the House could include Congressman Goodlatte's Ag Act, creating a new and simpler H-2C, 2-year work permit program for agriculture. Those on the Hill who insist on major comprehensive overhaul of immigration fear that fixing ag will set the precedent for other piecemeal attempts. And now looks like immigration reform has faded off into the sunset once more, along with the infrastructure legislation that was talked about early this year. I ask our committees to look again at our policy on the various issues of immigration. Specific items under discussion are availability of immigrant farm and ranch labor, acceptance of an e-verify system to document workers as legal non-citizens, shorten the time to process applications for legal citizenship, and enforce existing immigration laws and border crossing conditions. How does the Grange feel about these items? And do we have policy to express our opinions? We supported Congressman Goodlatte's Ag Act, but is there a better way to solve the farm labor crisis that could make it into law next year? Telecommunications. National Grange advocates continually for the deployment of high-speed broadband to the unserved and underserved areas of rural America. I continue to serve on the Federal Communications Commission's Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee. We've had 3 meetings this year, and we have another meeting December 6th and 7th. Our committee is looking at ways to break down legal, jurisdictional, political, economic, and regulatory barriers that greatly hinder broadband expansion into the rural landscape. The FCC has already taken some of our suggestions and started them through the regulatory process. Personal privacy for online internet users is an emerging issue for the Grange as we address the recent high-profile online privacy scandals. To quote South Dakota Senator John Thune, the question is no longer whether we need a national law to protect consumers' privacy. The question is what shape the law should take. Net neutrality. Net neutrality is a tough issue, principally because it sounds good that everyone should be an equal customer at an equal price for equal service. But everyone doesn't need the same service at the same price for the same priorities at the same speed. Rural, unserved customers would be happy to receive any internet service that would enable them to do business. They may not be interested in streaming the latest movie or downloading video games. Net neutrality defines broadband as a communications service that essentially makes it a public utility. Since 2015, until the FCC overturned those rules, investment in rural broadband expansion declined sharply. With the latest FCC open internet rules in place, interest in investing in rural broadband is growing again. FCC Chairman Pai is proposing to classify broadband as an information service, not subject to 1930s telephone monopoly regulations. The Grange has supported Chairman Pai's proposal at the FCC and to several members of Congress. The Grange's mission is to connect rural and small town America's schools, libraries, farms, hospitals, clinics, first responders, and startup companies. For rural America, it's all about getting connected, not how fast or how cheaply movies, games, or other apps download. 150th anniversary gala, the National Grange recognized 4 members of Congress with our Champion of Rural America Award during the December 4th gala at the Decatur House next door to our headquarters in Washington, D.C. The recipients are leaders on rural issues and are bipartisan in their legislative advocacy. Those recognized were Senator Susan Collins of Maine, Chairman of the Special Committee on Aging, Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan, Ranking Democrat on the Senate Agriculture Committee, Representative Greg Walden from Oregon, Chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and Representative Colin Peterson of Minnesota, Ranking Democrat on the House Agriculture Committee. It was a real pleasure to get to know these members and their staffs and to form working relationships for the Grange. This year, the National Grange and Grange Advocacy are jointly hosting a mini gala reception for our advocacy partners this December 4th to recognize and thank them and to announce 3 more Champion of Rural America Awards winners. Chairman Ajit Pai of the Federal Communications Commission, Senator Pat Roberts, Chair of the Senate Ag Committee, and the National Rural Health Association, a national nonprofit membership organization providing leadership on rural health issues through advocacy, communications, education, and research. Our National Grange fly-in, April 15th to 18th in Washington, was deemed a great success by the attendees. A total of 34 Grangers, including 3 juniors, from 14 states had 30 meetings with their senators, representatives, and staff liaisons. Grangers discussed the Farm Bill, rural broadband, healthcare, the ag workforce crisis, the opioid epidemic, commodity prices, lifeline communications, infrastructure, and local back home issues. We visited USDA for a briefing on their rural development programs, and the juniors spent some time at the Verizon headquarters to see their innovation center and sit in their mock combine. We hosted 3 college student interns this summer who were participating in the Fund for American Studies Institute on Business and Government Affairs. Because of class and seminar time requirements, the interns were at the Grange approximately half-time. They were exposed to the staff functions of the Grange, they wrote for the magazine, they helped with several projects, attended Hill meetings, and gained an appreciation for the Grange and grassroots organizations. Interns are so helpful to us in completing projects and research that our small office staff just doesn't have time to do. Our coalitions. National Grange is still an active member of several major coalitions concerned with healthcare, telecommunications, that's broadband, lifeline, and net neutrality, rural schools, farm policy, immigration, infrastructure, tax reform, and other coalitions on lesser issues. The Coalition for Paper Options was formed to assure citizens continue to have the option to receive government information, investment reports, and questionnaires via paper rather than electronically if they so choose. The campaign by federal agencies to quietly force the public to go paperless before they're ready ignores the fact that over 23 million rural and small town folks lack broadband access. We've been active with the Connect Americans Now Coalition. There's a representative here today, I believe. It proposes to use available broadcast spectrum or TV white spaces to deliver broadband to rural areas. This technology can carry communications over far greater distances and even penetrate walls and other obstacles and go across and around hills and mountains. The FCC has not yet acted to approve reallocation of this unused spectrum. The only opposition seems to be the broadcasting industry. Grange advocacy is expanding its reach, profile, and effectiveness. Coalitions in Washington and in the states are again looking to the Grange Grassroots Membership Network for help in reaching rural and small town America. The National Grange and partnering state Granges have worked together on opioids, prescription drug pricing, Medicare and Medicaid issues, healthcare access for seniors and rural citizens, high-speed rural broadband expansion, low-cost wireless service for the disabled, veterans, seniors, and people in remote areas, the Farm Bill, taxes, definition of milk, and much more. In some cases, Grange advocacy is able to share funding with state Granges to support advocacy efforts. However, it's critical that states coordinate early and closely with Grange advocacy before launching an advocacy effort on a national issue. Your National Grange and several state Granges have experienced a great year of building profile in Washington and around the country as we've tackled issues and relationships. Numerous National Grange op-eds on priority advocacy issues were published by major media outlets. Several of our state Grange partners were published at home on these same subjects. Official letters were sent to committee chairmen and ranking minority members of congressional committees on the Hill. Issue statements and policy positions were sent to all members of Congress. Official filing statements and petitions were sent to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Agriculture, the Chairman of the FCC, and the Assistant Attorney General. We're limited in what we can do by lack of staff and not enough hours in the days. Hopefully someday we can add a clerical person desperately needed to research and draft letters and editorials so we can increase our visibility in the Capitol. This added staff person would also complete other day-to-day tasks, freeing time for all our directors to do more high-level work, to provide excellent service to current members and attract new members to Grange. Critical issues in 2019. Our opportunities may be limited. Politics overrides statesmanship in Washington these days. Major issues are begging for attention and resolution. While policymakers from both parties in all regions of the country see the urgent need to fix these, they cannot agree on how to go about it. Beginning in January, we'll already be in presidential campaign mode for 2020. And that adds another layer to an already mean-spirited political divide. The National Grange has strong policy to rebuild ailing locks and dams, roads and bridges, and will continue to lobby for these on the congressional agenda. A rewrite of our immigration laws and a solution to our farm worker shortage dilemma are serious economic issues, but may be too politically charged to get serious action by Congress anytime soon. It's more important than ever that Grangers get involved in their communities and take responsibilities in government, from the township or towns to the school board, fire and ambulance companies, as county commissioners, state legislators, even congressmen. Grange members are knowledgeable about the issues, believe in American values with hometown roots, are honorable and sincere citizens that we need so much in our country's leadership. Granges over the past year have reported 852,136 hours of community service. And that's only from the 427 Granges that reported their hours. The real number is in the millions of hours. This is an amazing fact that we should really brag about. There are many people out there that want to help make a difference and would love to join with a wonderful group like the Grange if they knew about the work we do. We need to publicize our efforts, not to brag, but so we can enlist more doers and be able to do more. Is your Grange involved in your community? Do even your smallest projects give people a reason to come together and get to know their neighbors? Do people look to you for civic leadership and direction? Do you work at forming coalitions with other community groups and working together on service projects? Is your Grange a pillar organization? Most of all, do you believe and work to make sure your local Grange can help restore respect, civility, and patriotism to local communities and thus to our beloved country? I believe for each of us the answer is a resounding yes. We are heroes in our hometowns, superheroes in fact, who can improve our hometowns, improve our country, and restore civility and unity once again. As National Master Sherman Lowell said in 1923, a buoyant, optimistic spirit of leadership is our greatest need as an organization. And this need extends all along the line from the subordinates through the various higher channels. People will not affiliate themselves with any organization simply by virtue of its past reputation. The Grange must continue to deliver the goods, must courageously face new conditions, tackle new issues, and prove itself worthwhile if it expects to gather new support and even to hold its old backers. Close quote. Let's unleash our power in 2019. Put on our superhero capes and show the world what we Grangers can do.